Hey gang, how's it going? Chonky here. Today I'm going to be doing a breakdown of the Cleric Class. Um, I'll try and do one of these for each class in time once I get them all leveled up appropriately and fill out all their unique sets. But the Cleric is definitely my main character, I would say. So we're going to do that one first. So we're going to talk about the pros and cons of the class. Um, and then I'll break down, all the abilities, stats you want to go for, the difference between using one-handed weapon and a shield and a two-handed hammer, just sort of as much as I can about the clerics. So definitely the pros would be that this class is incredibly tanky. I would say it's even more durable than the champion. I think the rogue is probably the tankiest with the whole what is it, Shadow Cloak. You can get 95% damage reduction from that, and then another 5% from Vampiric Blades. So Rogue is the most broken class in the game. But aside from them, uh, the Cleric is extremely tanky, almost impossible to die. Has the best heals in the game, hands down. There's a lot of AoE damage, and pretty much everything it does is ranged, unless you have the Pious set, and we'll get to that later. Some cons I would say about the class is that it, I think, has the lowest damage output out of anybody. So, you might not die, but you're going to kill everything really slowly. So it's just a big slugfest. It kind of humbles you and makes you respect a lot of the bosses. There's no hard hitting AOE. The hardest hitting move the cleric has is Exorcism and then Divine Sacrifice. If you want to talk about that, which we will later. But Exorcism is only a single target spell, and even though it says it does 550% of your holy damage, it feels like it's weaker than a lot of my other spells. But it has hit for tremendous amounts of damage every now and then. If you get a combo of critting and getting your spell pen off, and they're not very resistant to magic or holy damage, but we can't really see that side of the stats. Another con for the cleric is there's no CC breaks, so you have to use the grog consumable, and that you can't just spam that. So if you're fighting multiple mobs that stun you repeatedly, you kind of just have to eat it, and then when you're free, damage them as much as possible before they stun you again. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of the skills, and I'm going to break them all down for you and give you my opinion on each one. Okay, so Holy Light, or I guess I'll go with Smite. So Smite is your left click. Pretty much you're gonna be using this a majority of the game. It generates Flurry, which at 5 stacks increases your auto attack damage by 10%. It doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're trying to do as much damage as possible, you really want to keep the Flurry at max stacks. And I'll talk about how I work my spells into my combat to try and keep Flurry maxed out all the time. So this is just your left click ability, very important. You want to buff this a lot. But in terms of the highest damage output, it's not your most important skill. Holy Light, fantastic, hands down. One of the best cleric spells that they have. Has extremely low cooldown. It has a really fast cast time, so you can actually combo it with some moves to keep your flurry up, because your flurry is only good for 5 seconds or 2 seconds. And then, so Holy Light you can cast while moving. You can get free casts of it from Divine Sacrifice if you have the Harbinger set. It hits surprisingly well at 350% holy damage. And the cooldown, like I said, 4 seconds. So you can almost spam it. So Exorcism. Oh, and I would give Holy Light, I'd give it a 9 out of 10. Exorcism. So this move itself, it can hit really hard because it has the highest percentage of holy damage. But most of the time it seems like it'll do maybe like 15,000, which is right around the range of every one of my skills. And it also has the longest cooldown besides your ultimate, which is Avatar State. You cannot cast it while moving. So Exorcism is a really big gamble. In my opinion, it's a hit or miss move. I would say try to use Exorcism if Avatar is up. Otherwise, kind of like it's like a secondary skill. If you have it, why not use it? But when I'm doing like my main skill rotations, it's not a regular cast. So I honestly, with the longest cooldown, not being able to cast while moving, and the really varying damage potential, I would honestly give Exorcism like a 4 out of 10. I don't really like it. So regen, very important move. You need this. You know, it's your basic heal as a cleric. You cannot hit yourself with channel heal, so you are left with regen and the full rejuve potions. So, I mean, very important move. 9 out of 10, I would say. You can get free triggers from regen. I'll talk about this more when I get into the Harbinger set. This isn't in the set description, but I've noticed that some of your moves will trigger regen. Like they have a chance to trigger it. So that makes it all the better because you don't have to physically cast it while you're fighting. You can just passively stay healed if you are casting enough spells. And we'll get into that more later. So, oh, and I would give regen a 9 out of 10. It's like one of the most important moves you need to have. So Resurrection, not important if you play solo. It is surprisingly useful when you're playing in parties. You only need 2 pieces of the Holy Order set, and instead of rezzing them with 30% health, they get rezzed with 100% health. It has like a super fast cast time, so you don't have to sit there and channel before you res your friends or anything. You can hit people through enemies, so it's actually quite useful. I would give Resurrection an 8 out of 10, just because it has, you know, no use in solo play. Channel Heal, same thing, only useful if you're playing in a party. It's really good. It can hit through enemies. So it used to not do that, but they made it so that you can hit your ally through a group of enemies. And if you have the Holy Order set maxed out, you can hit multiple people if they're standing next to each other. And it says 18% per second, but it feels like it's so much more. You'll heal them to max health very quickly. The biggest downside for me is that since it is called Channel Heal, you have to channel while casting it, which does take away from your damage that you would do in a team fight. Not that it's a whole lot, but you know, if you're playing traditional classes, tank, support, DPS, this is a very important move. This will keep your tank alive. I would give Channel Heal a 7 out of 10. Now, if I were to change Channel Heal, I'd probably have them make like an AoE heal, like you kind of put down something that just heals people inside of it. Maybe not as drastic as 18% a second, but, you know, just something like, that's how I would change Channel Heal, is just put like a little healing aura down. So Divine Shield, a must. Fantastic move. You can hit your allies with it. If you're using the Holy Order set and you have enough pieces, Divine Shield will also sometimes cast regen, which is fantastic, because then you're shielded for, with my bonuses to it, 150% of their max health, and then they would possibly get a heal. The cooldown, 18 seconds. It's almost low enough to where when your shield runs out, you can normally use it again, unless you're fighting really tough bosses that do a lot of explosive damage, like Blackhorn, pretty much any boss of any of the dungeons. Yargrim in Icy Depths, he crits really hard. Pretty much anybody who has high DPS will melt your shield, but you can supplement that with Heavenly Strike, the full rejuve potions, and then using regen anyway until Divine Shield comes off of cooldown. So I would give Divine Shield an 8.5 out of 10. You can also cast it while moving. Heavenly Strike. I did not like this move when I first unlocked it as I was leveling my cleric, but I actually grew to love this move. It hits surprisingly hard here at 391% compared to like my Holy Light, which is 357. It does like a nice AoE. It also does damage reduction depending on how much you've buffed it. So mine reduces 20% of all damage for 5 seconds, and the cooldown is 9 seconds. If you're using the Grand Magistrix set, you will greatly reduce the cooldown of Heavenly Strike, making it just as spammable as Holy Light. Fantastic move. You can cast it while moving. I would say it's in my main skill rotation. My 3 main skills are Holy Light, Heavenly Strike, and Divine Sacrifice, which we've yet to get to. But those are my 3 main skills that I use in my rotation for the most DPS. I would honestly give Heavenly Strike a 9 out of 10. I love that move. Fantastic. Holy Blast, not my favorite move. It has a really low cooldown. If you're using the Harbinger set, it can refresh your cooldown on Divine Sacrifice. But it does the lowest damage out of any of your moves. It does knock back in a small AoE when it hits. So it's only really useful in the icy depths when you get to the goblin area. You can knock people off the ledges. But other than that, I don't really use Holy Blast since it doesn't work on bosses. So I would give Holy Blast, I'd give it a 3 out of 10. Divine Sacrifice. This was another move that I was underestimating when I was starting the game. But I didn't realize that it does 2 sets of damage. So it does a single target hit. And then after 3 seconds, it does an AoE hit. Excuse me. For 3% of your health, which is nothing. That's pennies. So I would say Divine Sacrifice is the final move in my rotation of spells between Holy Light, Heavenly Strike, and Divine Sacrifice. Mixing these in with your auto attacks, you can keep your flurry up and still deal a decent amount of damage. And 10 meters is actually like a pretty good radius, so you can actually hit a good room of enemies with Divine Sacrifice. And then the last skill on here is the Avatar State. This is the Cleric's ultimate. You turn into an avatar, you start to float, and with the base skill, you increase your healing and damage by 20%. If you have the Holy Order set, and it's 5 out of 6 pieces, I think, that bumps up to 35%, which is fantastic. I don't really see... Oh, and I didn't grade Divine Sacrifice. I give that an 8 out of 10. I would give it higher if it did a little bit more damage, but you really have to hope that it does good damage on both procs for it to be really worth it. So Avatar, you can cast it while moving, but the buff I feel is not super huge for the 15 seconds that it's active. It actually goes by pretty quick when you're in combat. But I mean, being the cleric will take any damage increases that we can get. I just wish that it was 35 base instead of 20. So all in all, even though that it is the cleric's ultimate, I would only give it like a 6 out of 10. If it lasted longer or if the buffs were better, I would appreciate it more. Not to mention, since I have a big orc for my cleric, when I use it and I start to float, I take up a huge portion of the screen. So in certain boss fights where the quarters are really cramped, like I can think of two bosses off the top of my head, Victor von Vindensnarl, Victor from Icy Depths, and then Hashushu in the Lair of the Kyranids. Both bosses get really close to you, and if you're using Avatar State, you won't be able to see them, which is going to make it difficult to hit them with your skills. So that's pretty much a breakdown of all of the cleric's abilities, in my opinion. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get into the weapons. So when you should use one-handed weapons and shield versus two-handed weapon. So for me, personally, I like to use my two-handed hammer pretty much majority of the time because I mostly play solo. If I were to play on a group, I would want to use my one-handed weapon because with the Grand Magistrix set, you really reduce the cooldown of Heavenly Strike, and it increases the damage of it. So you now get to spam one of your best moves and give damage reduction to the whole party. The downside of staying on one hand and shield permanently is the class weapon buff, which is something that every class gets. So for using a one-handed weapon, you only get a 15% power boost, or spell power boost, 15% attack speed boost, and armor increase by 15%. So it is helpful, but I feel like the buffs from using two-handed weapons are just superior in terms of solo play. So I would mainly use a one-handed set if I'm playing with friends, and a two-handed set if I'm playing solo, because we just need the better damage output. So let's talk about the two-handed weapons. So the class weapon buff is 25% instead of 15%. You also get a crit damage increase of 15% and spell penetration increase of 30%. It does reduce your armor by 5%, but since the cleric is so tanky with the divine shield, all of the healing, and just stats in general from gear, because the chain set is tankier than like the cloth, which is, you know, spell power stuff for a wizard, the minus 5% armor, I don't really notice it. But the 30 spell pen is fantastic. You know, spell pen, like I said in my beginner's guide video, is like a secondary crit. So any increase to spell pen I love, as well as the crit damage increase and the spell power increase. Having an extra 10% on all of my spell power, you really notice it. You notice it with your smite, you notice it with any of your skills. It's hands down the way to go for DPS. So going from the class weapon sets, let's go into the elite armor sets. So the cleric has 4 elite sets right now. This I'm uploading this before Dreadforge comes out, and I think there's another elite set in Dreadforge, and then there's also going to be the 2 other confirmed dungeons later. Who knows what those bring? I might have to do an update video later on down the road. So we're going to go with the first 2 elite sets, which is going to be the Grand Magistrix set and the Holy Order set. So the Grand Magistrix set, like I said, is really good for buffing Heavenly Strike, and it's crucial if you want to be in a party using one-handed weapons. I wouldn't go into a party. I would definitely use the Grand Magistrix set because of the buffs it gives to Heavenly Strike. You only need the 2 pieces, the shield and the mace, and it increases damage of a Heavenly Strike by 50%, as well as reducing the cooldown by 6 seconds, which right now it's only 9 seconds. So it would be on a 3-second cooldown. And with my other buffs to Holy Light or Heavenly Strike, it would just make it a fantastic move. So Grand Magistrix set, I really liked it. I don't use it as much anymore, but I used it for a long time. Fantastic set. The next set that there is, I'm not going to go put all the armor on, but it is the armor of the Holy Order. This set is really good in terms of survivability. It buffs your avatar state by 15% for both healing and damage. It does reduce the cooldown of your shield by a few seconds. It gives you full res at only 2 pieces of armor, and it allows your shield to potentially heal people. And Channel Heal can hit an additional target at 6 out of 6 pieces, which I feel is kind of lackluster in terms of a final skill. I wish it had more oomph. All in all, the set isn't that bad. There are some things I wish I could take from it with other sets, and I used it for a long time, but frankly, I feel that the Harbinger set is better in terms of playing solo. So the Holy Order set is really good, but I prefer the new Harbinger set. So we're going to talk about the Harbinger set, and then I'm going to get into the Pious set, which is my least favorite set. So the Harbinger set, this was released with Icy Depths. It does take a little bit to farm all the pieces, but fantastic. It reduces the cooldown of Holy Blast by 4 seconds, which is meh. You know how I feel about Holy Blast. I don't really like it very much. They did give Holy Blast a slight chance to reset the cooldown on Divine Sacrifice, which is cool, but you have to stop moving to cast Holy Blast, and it's only like less than a third of a chance to get your spell back, which Divine Sacrifice doesn't even have that long of a cooldown anyway. So for me, the first 2 skills in this armor are kind of lackluster, but then from there, that's when you start to see all the cool skills, because at 4, where Divine Sacrifice can sometimes trigger Holy Light, I feel that this is where your moves can also secretly trigger regen. It's not on here, but the moment I started wearing the Harbinger set, I was able to cast regen on myself. I think it's about 30% chance, I'm not certain, but whenever I use Divine Sacrifice, Heavenly Strike, or Holy Light, it seems that those 3 skills have a chance to give me a free regen, which is fantastic. It does increase the area of effect of Divine Sacrifice by 50%, so you can hit even more people with that secondary hit. And then the last one, you don't really notice the damage increase too much, I feel like, but it increases the damage from Holy Light, Holy Blast, and Divine Sacrifice by 50%, which for Holy Light and Divine Sacrifice, that's huge, because those 2 skills are in my main rotation of spells. So personally, I love the Harbinger set. The first two skills unlocked are awful in my. I wouldn't say awful, but they're lackluster. But the last three are fantastic. So yes to the Harbinger set. So now the Pious set. Okay, so the Pious set on paper, it sounds like it would be amazing. Uh, but I have a big gripe with the Pious set. I have spoke with the devs. They might do some changes because it is very underwhelming, the Pious set. So it turns Smite, which is a very fast-acting auto attack move that is ranged, and it makes Smite melee. Now, if you're using the one-handed set, Smite being melee is awesome because it doesn't change your attack speed at all, and you can just wail on them for decent damage. But if you are using the two-handed hammer, it changes your attack altogether. You go from being, decently fast to extremely slow. Now, I get that they slowed down the attack speed because now you have a cleave, but it still is too slow to really be of use in fights where you would want to cleave because you get stunned so often. Not to mention, it's incredibly difficult to keep your flurry stacks up because of how slow it attacks. It almost makes it not worth it to cast your spells in between swings because you will lose your flurry stacks in between your attacks, and using just spells as a cleric is not going to get you by because you're losing out on a lot of damage output. The third skill, I'm sorry, I lost my So another thing that the Pious set does is it says it deals an additional 75% physical damage, and then if you get 3 pieces of the set, it increases your melee power by 75% of your spell power, which on paper is huge. That sounds incredible. That sounds like you would almost more than double your damage output. Sadly, it's not that simple when it comes to the damage ratings from your attacks. I would say it increases my auto attack damage by about 50% compared to my ranged attacks with the regular two-handed hammer, but with how slow you attack, it's not worth it. I can still get better damage output from my ranged attacks. And it is nice to reduce the cooldown of Heavenly Strike by 3 seconds, but with all of the other cooldown reduction that I have, I don't really notice the 3 seconds when I don't have the set on. So honestly, the Pious set, very disappointed by it. I hope they end up changing it in the future, because it sounds really cool, and I would like to just run around and smack people in the head with a giant two-handed hammer. So now we're going to get into, let's do heroism skills. So for heroism, personally, because I play solo, I want to go for the best damage output possible. So I would prioritize crit chance and spell penetration first, just because you want the extra 100 spell pen, which is huge, and a 10% crit chance, which isn't as noticeable as the spell pen, but it still is nice to have that extra crit. After that, I would definitely increase your attack speed and the cooldown reductions. Once you get those, you're several hundred levels into your character. Then from there, you can kind of branch out. I put it on Smite. I would also recommend doing it for Holy Light, or if you're playing with friends, maybe buffing your shield a little bit. The Heavenly Strike buffs are decent, but I wouldn't prioritize them. Another one you can go for is the Holy Light damage. So you would do an increased 10% holy damage from everything, if my assumption is correct. So this is actually probably what I'm going to invest in next after I finish crit damage in 3 levels. If you're not playing solo and you want to just focus some things for playing with your friends, I would recommend buffing your shield, your cooldowns, the duration of Heavenly Strike, and then after that I would do attack speed, crit chance, maybe smite, but not so much you don't want to focus as much on the damage if you're trying to help your friends. Also, if you are... So let's talk about gear stats, what you want to look for. Um, what I look for in my armor stats is mostly like you want bonus spell power, you want bonus health, you want bonus armor, because that's just going to really increase the overall performance of your cleric. If you can't get to those rolls on your gear, the skills that you would want to buff would be like Smite, Divine Shield, Holy Light. If you can get plus to Heavenly Strike as well, it's really good, especially if you have high rolling Eternal gear. Like I have 30% increase to my skills. Attack speed is nice. Crit damage is nice. I wouldn't prioritize crit damage too much. If you can go for crit chance, I would do that. I wouldn't prioritize deflection and glancing blow too much. There's only a couple characters that crit you really hard, and I think the only ones that are dangerous with crits are in the icy depths with Victor and Yargrim. So, you know, if you don't want to build glancing blow and deflection, don't worry about it. I would mainly focus bonus spell power, bonus health, bonus armor. If you can get magic resistance, that's not bad. But my magic resistance is not as high as my armor, and I still feel like I survive pretty well. If you're looking for weapons, so when it goes to stats for weapons, you kind of want to look for, you know, of course, damage and spell power, and it would be nice if you can get some skill increases in there, but the main thing you want to look for is elemental attributes as well. From what I've gathered, talking with the devs in their Discord, the more elemental attributes you have on your weapon, the various types of damage you're going to deal from said weapon, which means it's just going to be better damage output overall against the enemies because, you know, they have different resistances. So if you can hit their weakness, you're going to do marginally more damage overall. So that's the only thing I can really recommend. You know, get the stats you want, crit chance, crit damage. If you can get buffs to some of your moves, that's great. Penetration, great. But if you can get elemental stuff like ice, nature, holy, void, fire, all that stuff, that's what you want to look for in weapons. The only other thing I would really point out is potions. You know, obviously also make sure that all of your skills are maxed out. You know, you always want to be checking with your teacher to make sure everything's maxed. The moment you can level something up, you should. And also, I know that we have fantastic heals as a cleric, but you should still invest in the max rejuve potions. These things are the biggest lifesaver in the game, I feel. You get 70% of your health in the, like, max health in the end. But it feels like the 35% over 8 seconds is so much more than actual 35%. I think that's because you get bonus healing from some of your smaller equipments like your necklace and your cape and stuff like that. But rejuve potions, fantastic to have. But even more important, especially for the cleric, more important than the rejuve potions, you need the elixir of wisdom. This increases your spell power by another 35% for 15 minutes, which of course is increased if you have, you know, food buff stuff in your equipment. So definitely look for that. There are other consumables that haven't been released yet. You can get some as a reward, but if you go to Lena, you can get stuff to increase your armor and resistance if you are dying a lot in the dungeons. Which I would say that these are better geared towards like wizards and rangers. But we'll get to those classes later. There is a food item that you can't buy that increases your penetration by a percentage, but we're waiting for those to come out. The devs, you only get a couple as a reward from one of the quests with Lena, I think, and so you can't really buy them. But other than that, I think that's a full breakdown of the Cleric class. I have a lot of fun playing the Cleric. I definitely think they should do more damage because being the lowest DPS class, it takes me a long time to farm anything on the Cleric. But they're a lot of fun. Like I said before, fighting certain bosses will humble you because you really have to learn their play styles and try and maneuver around them. But it's a lot of fun. You know, it feels like a pretty entertaining class, and if you really get into the nitty gritty of combat, which I'll get into in a moment, it's, you know, it's all good, baby. It's good fun. All right, gang. Now I'm gonna try and show you how I maximize damage as the Cleric class. As I said before, you get 5 stacks on Flurry for a 10% damage increase. So what I'll do is I'll get max stacks, and then I cycle through my 3 main skills, which are Divine Sacrifice, Holy Light, and Heavenly Strike. Holy Light is special. It casts fast enough where you can do Divine Sacrifice or Heavenly Strike and a Holy Light with them, and you can still attack in the 2-second window before your Flurry goes away. I will use Avatar mode as much as I can, except for in this fight where I'm going to demonstrate. I only use Avatar on High Summoner Gabriella. With Cold Snap, I just use my main rotation. So what we're going
You dare enter our city. You've underestimated me.
So all right, so right now I've got my 5 Flurry stacks. All right, so now we'll do Divine Sacrifice, and then I'll attack him twice. Holy Light, Heavenly Strike, back to auto attacking. Auto attack twice, Divine Sacrifice, Holy Light, back to auto attack. Oh, I lost my stacks because I wasn't quick enough. So if you want to make sure you don't lose your Flurry stacks, just do like a spell every 2 hits. And you'll find that the damage output is pretty sufficient. But so yeah, that's how I maximize damage. Oh my gosh, shut up, Gabriella. That's how I maximize my damage potential as the Cleric. I mean, normally I would use Avatar State whenever I can, but if you're just looking for good ways to keep your damage up, cycle your skills in between your auto attacks. You want to keep your Flurry stacks up. If you're using the one-handed, like one-handed and shield, you can get a little more loosey-goosey because you attack so fast. So you can definitely cast 2 spells and go to town. But yeah, so that's how I do combat as the Cleric. Hopefully that helps you guys out. Well, I think that's just about going to wrap up my breakdown of the Cleric class. I really like it. It's been my favorite class, despite the low damage output. Hopefully I answered some questions if you guys had any. If I didn't, go ahead and put them in the comments below and I'll get to them. I check my comments multiple times a day. The next class breakdown I plan on doing is the Wizard once I finish farming for the class. And there are other videos I plan on doing for Dungeons of Sundaria. There's one I want to do for how I make money. When they release the new crafting system, I want to do a breakdown of the new crafting. And I also plan on doing some boss breakdowns. In the Discord and in some of the comments of my videos, people have asked about certain bosses in particular. So maybe what I'll do is try to break down their movesets as best I can, because the devs don't tell us anything about the enemy bosses. So I'll break down their moveset as best I can and then give strategies for how I beat them, and I'll use each class to do it. So hopefully you guys, if you have any questions or any bosses in specific you want me to cover first, because I have a couple I've thought about, but if you guys have any that you really need help with, put it in the comments and I'll get to work on it. But thank you so much. Have a good day. Kiss, kiss.